Good morning. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm putting this document at the top of my little spiel here, which is called um, Show Us Your Badge, Ownership Established by Use. And basically, I'm trying to do this to sum it up so that for those who don't want to read all through this, they can read this, and that's all they need to know. And that's the funny thing about this is that this is a monstrous document, but yet what I'm actually saying is, in terms of practical usage, really, really simple. And that is very simple. You have rights. Bang. And these rights can't be taken away from you. Now, I'm going to also start off with two very basic points here as well before we get into how these things can be applied in practical terms. Number one is that, you know, all of these rights, the way that they work, is they're not rights about for rights for the right and rights for the left and rights for the heterosexuals and rights for the gays and rights for Brian Tamaki and rights for uh, um, the rainbow community. They're rights for everybody. Okay, and the whole point of what I'm saying is that if you've got anybody turning around and saying, "Oh no, we only have rights," then they're bullshitting, because public servants. The whole point of emergency service is it's about the whole the civil service, which is that's public servants, which is they work for the public. That's you and I. That's everybody. That's everybody in this country. Okay, even if you only arrived here and you've got your resident citizen or your residency. In fact, even if you're a tourist, these rights are rights for everybody. And anybody that says no, then walk away, And anybody that's uh, trying to use the situation to grandstand to build up their own platform or their own agenda, we need to be kicking to touch, because anybody that's there, they're vulnerable. The other thing that those groups, I said to you, there are groups out there that I think from the far left and the far right that are being very much well funded, and any of these groups that are turning around and saying, "Oh no, only we get rights," they are the weakness. They are the thing that will actually destroy your attempt to stand up for your rights and garner public sympathy. So walk away from that. Same likewise. Anybody advocating violence, walk away from that. And anybody that's trying to actually bring into this movement something that's not from New Zealand, that's to do with American politics or whatever, or UN politics, walk away. Okay, that's my first point. Second thing is, of course, there's a lot of these things that we turn around and get talked at, is that we start to look at things like, there's a lot of attempt to kind of go, it's all about racism and white supremacism, and you know what? There are those groups within this area, and they are being funded, and that's also true on the left as well. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when we turn around, we look about the issue of rights, so things like we look at things like, Hipuana, Three Waters, and so on. Is that when you start to look really, really closely into it, is that number one is that a lot of the Maori community, or the Maori world, is not ignorant of this factor, and they are aware that people are trying to play the situation. So don't be afraid of your Kazi bros. That we're all into this together. And again, New Zealand's very, very, very unique, and that our customary rights. I mean, I'm quite an anomaly in that I'm a seventh generation New Zealander. My nephews and nieces are eighth generation Kiwis. They do actually have enough from their whakapapa to be constituted as being Maori. But normally that's the situation. If you're seventh or eighth generation, you normally got enough Maori blood in you anyway to be considered a Maori. So what's the bloody problem? And those customary rights actually protect us, and they protect both Pākehā and they both protect Maori things. So we shouldn't be afraid of that aspect of it. New Zealand's very unique. 1835. Declaration of the Nation, not the statehood. People often get that confused, but that's the Declaration of the Nation, recognising the Maori as an indigenous nation that has their independent sovereignty, of at least of the hapu that were involved in that. 1840 is the document of the statehood, okay, nation, statehood. And that's the one where it recognises basically that it turns around and also says, well, actually, we recognise customary rights. So it does it the second time, twice. It's now the spell's being woven twice. Then it turns around and it recognises the citizens of the country have the protection of the English law of the Westminster Palace, Her Majesty's Service. Very, very, very important. A lot of naughty mischief has gone on afterwards to make people think that Queen and Her Majesty's Service are the same. They are not. And there is a lot of what I go into my documents explaining about how courts have slapped governments over the hands beforehand for trying to make out like they've got royal prerogatives when they don't. And royal prerogatives is, it's not about the corgi and the Queen and her inbred corgis. It's basically about whether it was done through the Westminster system, which is the backbone of modern democracy, the Magna Carta system, which founds a lot of the founding charters for a lot of the democracies, and they deal with the individual rights of human beings. So this is what I get into. And again, one of those things very, very important again is that when we went through this debate, I don't know why we're having it again, because we did this in 1987 with the homosexual law reform bill, where that's what basically repealed the illegality of it under the inherent dignity, which goes to the autonomy of body. Virtually every single major charter in the world actually acknowledges the body autonomy. So, we shouldn't be having this debate because we've already actually had it, which is the fact that everybody has these rights. Rainbow, Christian, left wing, right wing, we've all got them. And they're there. The whole point of all these rights and the way that they're designed to do is twofold. One is they're designed to do checks and balances so that democracy doesn't just become a power of the mob, which at the moment, which is under the New Zealand government system, is what it's actually doing. I would very, very strongly question the current legitimacy of Parliament. I think it's got major constitutional issues, but you can read the document to get into that gnarly, deep issues. The main issue is the fact that when it comes to declaring declarations of emergencies, governments are expected to follow principles of laws, and my document goes into explaining why they didn't follow these principles of laws. Now, when you look overseas, and I'll pick the issue of Japan, and I'll just quote you this very, very quickly, and then you can get into reading this if you want to. And this is from Japan historically had an issue with vaccine hesitancy. You wouldn't know by looking at its COVID immunization shots. Before the world's third largest economy started administrating shots, it had one of the lowest rates of vaccine confidence in the world. Now the country which started doling out immunization months after the United States has the highest inoculus rates among the groups of 7 leading industrial nations, and it did it without mandates of any kind. That's actually pretty much the norm around the world. And in the case of Japan's case, they're sticklers for law. They know that if they get it wrong, corporate Japan knows that if they get it wrong, they will get, they'll get sued the hell out of them. And so they're protecting themselves by saying, no, we want you to strongly advise it. We want you to use as much marketing as you possibly can, but no, don't make it a mandate because, once it's proven, we're the ones that are going to get it in the neck. So collectively, from the viewpoint of the workers' situation, is that you need to go back to your workers and say, well, when you do this, what you're doing is you're following the strongly worded advice of the government. Now, the government advice, once you start to understand the advice, is actually not come from, basically, they've got major flaws in their argument and they will be picked apart. But the question is that if you, the worker, the boss of your company, enforces it, it's not the government that's going to turn around and say, oh, sorry about it, here's the money to make up for us getting it wrong. You are going to take it out of your back pocket. So you need to go back as workers to your bosses and basically point out to them that you do realise this goes wrong, it comes out of your pocket, that the government's not going to come and rescue you'll be the one who sees your business go collapse because you basically you just accepted without questioning whether this was actually correct or not. It's not. Okay. So the second thing is you need to form your own collectives. The work and safety have got some really, really good stuff in there about private prosecution. There are also processes that you can actually form disputes, workers' disputes or tribunals disputes, so that you enter into negotiation with your bosses. The idea is that you create remedies and solutions so they don't have to go into court, and it's cheaper for everybody and all round. And basically, that's what you need to basically be turning around to. And again, if your bosses won't do that, then they're weak in this position. So when you do go turn around and you actually have to take actual lawyers to get them, then they're going to be even more vulnerable. And you need to kind of hammer that point home as well. The common law rights are very, very important. They basically give you the ability to actually have your own rights. And so, you just have to use them. Now, all these other things that they go, vaccines, it hasn't been proven. You need to go to get your doctor to verify. That's a trick. Because you go down there and the doctor's going to go, oh, no, we can only get exemptions from the Ministry of Health. Well, bollocks, because then they simply turn around and say, well, it's actually not, you're passing the buck onto the doctors, and they're, of course, going to pass the buck onto the government. It's going to say, oh, no, that's not true. When you have to turn around and say, well, no, you're actually responsible for actually ensuring that there's a safe and work environment for all of us. And you have to prove, if you think that we're a threat, that we are a threat. Because if you're not proving that, and instead I keep playing the burden of proof is, then what you're doing is you're actually basically acting with prejudice, and good luck to you. You're gonna get your ass sued off. I also recommend that basically, what I'm trying to do with all of this is build the arguments so that I can then apply it to different lawyers and people I know that we can actually look at practical ways that we can apply this. And once I get that information and I've passed this through to those people, I'll start feeding it back. But the short version is, the mandate is just that. It's not a law, and that's it. You just have to turn around and say, well, no, I've got rights already. I've got a right to come to work and not be held prejudice against it. And I have a right to be, you can't turn around and start forcing a vaccine onto me, because then you're putting me into a situation where you're putting me at risk. Now, it's not a question about me having to prove that the vaccine's safe. The government's got to prove that it's actually safe. And the way that it's doing it, it's actually, I'm saying to you, is it's actually, no, it's not following the general principles which allow it to do what it's doing. And this final, I'll point this out to you, that the cases at the moment have occurred where basically lawyers have gone into the court, and it's, again, a bit of a false flag. They've gone in there and they've challenged the court system using the Bill of Rights 1990, and the judges have shooed them away, and everyone's got angry at the judges. No, they shouldn't. The judges are doing the right thing, because under those systems, yes, that's correct, because they're using the Bill of Rights 1990s, which has no teeth, and the judges don't really want, the judges don't really want the Bill of Rights, because they don't want to empower it, because they're not dumb. They understand that the Bill of Rights is ultimately putting them out of a job. And again, I get into that in part 2 of this document, which I've yet to release. But basically, if you read between the lines, the judges are actually being very, very, clever, and they are kind of giving us a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But it's up to us, the human, the citizenry, to empower those judges so that they can actually allow us to employ, to actually give those customary rights their dues, as it were. DUS, by the way. So yeah, that's basically my major point. The other aspect of this whole situation is that the process by which we're actually working through things is that the government is sort of trying to make it that it's got all the power in the world. Well, it doesn't have all the power in the world, and there are cases. The very big one that I actually have to keep applying to is Muldoon versus Fitzgerald, which basically says the government is expected to follow the law of the land too, and it can't just make up stuff. And along the way, all the bigger picture is that they're trying to move away the individual rights, and this is happening through so many cases I point out in both part 1 and part 2 of how they're doing it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they don't really actually have teeth to stand on. So that's it. Pretty straightforward, really simple. I wrote top problems. Took me 4 weeks to put this all together, and I summed up in 10 minutes, which is, you've got common law rights. These rights are very, very well protected, and these also apply to customary rights. When we turn around and look at, it's not just also New Zealand. I'll finally end by saying that the customary rights have been tested in terms of showing that common law rights actually have practical applications in everyday law. Basically, in Canada as well, with following the rulings on the TPPA, and that the First Nations weren't consulted about that, and we're obliged to do so. So that acknowledges the customary rights of the First Nation people of Canada. So, and this is also happening again. We're seeing that cases of tikianga are being recognised in courts in New Zealand. So again, recognising customary rights. So there are plenty of precedents out there that show that customary rights, which are under Maori law, we will call them tikianga, and in New Zealand laws, we will simply call them common law rights, but they are the same thing. Yes, we've got them, and in New Zealand, we're very unique because we've got them protected threefold. 1835 protects it, and then 1840 protects it both by the Treaty of Waitangi, and then by recognition of citizens protected by the Westminster, basically protected by English law. So that's it. Pretty simple, really. You've got your rights, use them or lose them.